Hello, and thank you for your interest in my research here at Gen Experience. My name is Matt Steckler, and just a little about me. I play sax and compose, have several recordings out for a few ensembles I lead, and I'm a fan of a lot of different types of music. And I also have taught music at college and K-12 programs in the States and Canada, and I have a master's in jazz performance and a doctorate in composition. The research I'm sharing today is directly inspired by my own experiences as both a band leader and a freelance performer in places like New York, Boston, and Winnipeg. It also draws on my experience as a music educator and, by extension, my ongoing interest in the creative process, particularly the issues facing practitioners of jazz and other music of the African diaspora. And while some academic jargon is used in the poster you're seeing here, I do believe this study could have implications for musicians of all ages, from amateur to professional. I'd like first to draw your attention to the idea of hierarchy as a process norm in most traditionally conceived jazz environments, be they pedagogical or professional. Save certain notable exceptions, jam sessions come to mind, we're mostly accustomed to a leader running the proceedings. And while this can have clear advantages in terms of efficiency and consistency of vision, there is often an inconsistency in expectation for engagement and preparation by the other players. The reasons vary, but can range from the demands of the musician in an increasingly challenging marketplace to deferring most of the key decision making in rehearsal to the leader. Of course, improvisation, jazz's key ingredient and the feature that draws most of us to it, thrives on the agency of all players. But the ways in which many jazz players prepare to improvise, often in isolation, are at odds with the health of a process that might serve to bring an original new work into being. It's divorced from the much coveted input from these other musicians, especially early in the process. There are, of course, several examples in the history of Western art music and jazz that have challenged basic hierarchical norms. As we see here, Western art innovations of this sort fall generally under the rubric of indeterminacy. While jazz composition innovations often apply improvisation in some novel, decentralized way. These examples demanded a reoriented manner of thinking and committing on the part of all performers, and in many ways challenged several biases that dominated the greater musical ecosystem, several of which I list here. In my own career, I eventually came to a point as a composer and bandleader where I felt my process had begun to stagnate. I turned my attention to the inherent biases and habits of every process and sought ways to break through them. Much of what I longed for included a greater sense of collaboration and belonging among the participants. These early experiments evolved into a study that became my doctoral dissertation. The existing literature of recent years that argues embodied musical gestures can help us better understand music cognition inspired me to seek ways in which the creation of music could be more broadly meaningful to all participants, even to where we broaden what it means to compose. Hence the phrase embodied composition. As a lead investigator, among other co investigators, I created a research design that leveraged the strengths of a collective process, which I've described in this graphic. The resultant work EcoBeat Heresy featured source materials contributed by the many, a balance of action and reflection, rotating leaderships, and a score that brought together traditional and non traditional techniques and multimedia, and tons of solo and collective improvisation. Satisfying, but exhausting. Since that time, I've followed with a variant study that aims to streamline the process to demonstrate its replicability. In my time teaching at Brandon University in Canada, I drew upon the big talent pool of that small community and, through some generous funding support, put together a research design that made sense for those environs. Paramount was being inclusive of the lived experiences of all investigators by asking again that they interpret a given theme as they see fit by collecting recordings in the field and writing reflections on them in a journal. The real sound and meaning behind this source material then became the basis for a pre-score meant to guide a recorded group improvisation. In contrast to the prior study, which culminated in a concert, the final stage of this variant was in recorded form, using submitted data and digital processing as part of a collage or musique concrète. Throughout the process, there were discussions and exposures to one another's data and rationale to clarify and process the why of making performative decisions in real time. And at the conclusion, an interview with each investigator was conducted to describe his or her lived experience of the process. The precepts that govern such a process are as follows. Embodied action, real sound and gesture, and reflection, or narratives, bring intersubjective meanings to the compositional process. The process from there is a spiral. Qualitative data is fed back recursively, and the work grows in a meaningful way, or the group acts as an intersubjective neural network in consort. It can produce a score in the visual sense or not, and there isn't a specific sound to the result. What matters most is flow and trust in the process. Aspects of determinacy and indeterminacy can coexist. And here's a sample pre-score and audio excerpt for Phases from the piece Long Time Ago Rumble. For the duet piece Shape of Rumbles to Come, a simple list of opposites served as the pre-score, generated from the source data.
Revolution is necessary, but it's not possible if it's visible. Those revolutions either get crushed or they get co-opted. In other words, capitalism just finds a way to diffuse the energy and make a profit from the symbol. especially at this stage, thrives on consent and participation. Possible solution is to find ways in your own personal life to withdraw that consent and withdraw that participation.
Yes.
Walk among them, right? Still be a functioning member of society, but just gradually withdraw your consent and support from the systems that are doing all the things you don't want them to do, whatever they may be. Financial oppression, environmental degradation.
You can hear in these examples use of the field recordings and digital signal processing, but it's important to understand embodied composition doesn't prescribe a particular style or sound. It's really about committing to a group process. I'll now read the main takeaways from our results interpreting the composite interviews. In a composite description of the collected interviews, several linkages were noted common to all investigators. 1. The purposeful ambiguity of the given theme and assignment led to a diversity of submitted data, albeit all submissions reflected some binary or opposition characteristic of a rumble. 2. All respondents observed a natural flow to the improvised performances and to the final recordings post-editing. 3. Investigators found this process to be more meaningful due to concerted efforts to be faithful to the theme, data strands, and interactions off which the data and schema were based, and were challenged to think more articulately about how such a guided process might play out. They also appreciated the generous amount of time between steps to reflect on the process and to articulate commonalities in their musical mindset. 4. Investigators experienced an increased sense of agency, reciprocity, and collaboration as a result of this process. Dealing with multiple units of data in real time that reflect multiple participants' submissions and meanings is a distinguishing feature defining this study. 5. An openness by all participants to have ownership over source material and rationale, yet to be willing to have that data transformed by the embodied group dynamic is a major positive this process afforded. I've concluded as a result of these findings that the basic research design of embodied composition is flexible enough to accommodate scenarios in K-12, higher ed, and the professional world, including situations we see increasing during times of pandemic and other causes for distancing. I'd relish the opportunity to see something like it tried by others, and I predict altogether uniquely different results in creative output and meaning with each iteration. That's my basic presentation. Thank you again for your time, and feel free to reach out to matthewsteckler@gmail.com and also visit mattystex.com if you're interested in the double album Long Time Ago Rumble, which features music from this research alongside other music. Have a great rest of the conference.